Some people would describe me as a kind of a nerd, considering my tastes in anime, gaming, and comics. I wouldn't describe myself as such, I just know what I like. But the truth is, I do absorb a lot of comic related media, from My Hero Academia to The Avengers. That said, it seems to surprise people when I tell them that I don't watch live action superhero movies. In fact, I vowed to myself not to go to the theater to see another superhero movie unless some specific criteria are met. Now, this choice of mine goes back to the day I decided to watch X-Men Apocalypse. Now, X-Men is one of my favorite superhero properties of all time. The 90s cartoon show was very impactful to me growing up. I loved the strength of the characters and the storytelling. So going into the movie, I had very high hopes. I mean, they promised a lot with it. A new cast, new origins, a very good looking Jubilee. But what I got instead was disappointment and indigestion. Why aren't you taking Jubilee with you? Why are all these characters choosing to follow Apocalypse with barely an incentive? Why are you leaving the plot to follow Wolverine, who came out of nowhere? And why is Apocalypse's power so generic? The entire experience forced me to realize something that I had been feeling, but not admitting, for some time. Superhero movies aren't really that good. Sure, they can be an enjoyable distraction, but are they worth the offense? As someone who grew up on comics and superheroes, I have a depth of knowledge and familiarity with many of the franchises that we're seeing in films nowadays. Yet growing up, I was fine with the fact that this was a niche market. In the 90s and 2000s, very few superhero movies were being made. It was possible that I may get a chance to see maybe one or two of this type of movie a year. Most blockbusters were a combination of action-adventure comedies or dramas. It was a privilege to see a superhero movie in film because it rarely happened. Now, superhero movies are hitting the screens in droves. In recent years, there may be an average of 10 superhero movies of varying types playing in theaters, not to mention the ones that go direct to video. There's also the abundance of superhero television shows for even the most obscure heroes. With all of these superhero movies and shows playing from the big screen to the small screen, avid genre experts like myself cannot help but hold a microscope up to what is being presented. Does this movie capture the essence of these characters? Is the origin the same? How is the acting? Is this a good story? Are there any stakes? In the past, these adaptations were so rare that there was nothing to hold them against. But now, multiple versions of the same characters and stories can pop up in movies or television shows in the same year. Sometime over the past 10 years, the superhero genre has replaced the action-adventure drama and comedy as the new main blockbuster. And with this has come what I'd like to call the blockbusterification of properties that were once quite esoteric. Now, all of the movies have to have explosions. The snarky jerk character with a heart of gold. There has to be a main character who's going to be probably a Jesus analog or a King Arthur analog, and we're going to try to make the villain as garish as possible. Now, this blockbusterification is only to say that because of the marketability of this genre of film, there has developed some easily identifiable tropes that are often reproduced in this genre of film to varying effects. So because of this, going to the movies now to see a superhero movie is a difficult experience for me because there's a chance that I will be let down. I know the characters. I know how they've been adapted in the past. I know the story. I have a higher level of expectation of what these characters are and what they could potentially bring to film. So when I go into a movie like X-Men Apocalypse expecting to have a good time and wanting to have a good time, the film gives me a large amount of cognitive dissonance when I view what, in my opinion, are poor creative choices, a disjointed plot, and generic or forgettable dialogue. At this point, I'd much rather go back to the days when blockbuster franchises were action-adventure movies whose entire plot and lore were drafted up from scratch in some writer's room 2 years prior to its release. It would be a far less evil for me to go to a theater and see a movie with zero expectations about what I might see. With nearly a dozen superhero films coming out per year, it isn't worth the blow to my fandom to see another unmemorable movie in theaters. Not to mention the price. If they continue to make roughly 10 superhero movies a year and send them to theaters, that's roughly $70 and 25 hours of my life spent watching a genre that I love, but films that I only enjoy watching maybe 35% of the time. So my rule now is that unless the movie has an IMDb rating of 8.0 or higher, I won't see it in theaters. It's a good compromise and generally allows me to see only the good superhero movies. Unless for some nostalgia or culturally related reason I feel like I need to see a particular movie, I always stick to this. Otherwise, I'll just see the movie when it comes on TV.